recently saw an aerial shot of it taken out slightly sideways from a small plane, and realized how big it is. I think I would have been almost, but not quite, put off had I known that it is holds about, well, we could say at least 6 sub-prisons, including the women's prison and Bangkok Special Prison, and I think that's there. But whatever the case, its total numbers come to close to 22,000 as we speak. And I did ask friends to kind of, now this was before the era of Google Maps or anything like that. So really the information my visitors could give me was so limited, they couldn't walk around the side of it. My only real glimpse into it was we had an excuse on Sundays to go down to a supposedly Christian meeting. It was quite a hallelujah chorus. The Nigerian guys, I mean, there were 700 of them there, had kind of turned it into a good old down south. It was everything but handling of snakes, but I think we probably could have arranged that in that prison. It was full of critters. And that gave me an idea of how far you'd have to go just to get to the edge of the place. And I got a good eyeful of the, what would it be, 12, 14 meter outer wall. Now that might not sound a lot, but that is quite high. And it had barbed wire at the top of it, which was electrified. So that threw up some interesting thoughts. And the only the only background on that I could scare up was that 2 guys had managed to get up there during the day and got a bit of a tingle out of it and fell back into the grounds of a kind of Klong Prem monastery, which is somehow tucked in there as well. I think it was enlarged. Of course, the monks turned them in. Yeah, they always do that. God will sort it out. They're very big on that. So ultimately, when I reached that point, which was just before the prison was up, sort of coming to life at about 5:45 in the morning, I just had to become a bit athletic and just inch myself slowly, leg at a time. And I'd already changed into my long trousers because prisoners inside that jail are not allowed long trousers. Yet the sweat from that was getting a bit of a charge through it. Not enough to interfere, but if I'd been of a nervous disposition, it might have made it worse. So, as I say, it coming now to know how big it is, I think I'd be, I don't know, James, can you get any more nervous than knowing that within a couple of weeks, which was the case at that point, I'd be found guilty and sentenced to death. In those days, it was by machine gun. Is that quick? I don't know. It's probably not quite as, they use injectables now. But it's a strange thing that you can't really imagine being shot to death. It's so outside of anything you can compare with experience that you don't exactly have a fear of it. It's just too out there. Whereas some other awful things that happened to you, I was in Karachi once in some dungeon there and being tortured with electricity. I don't know why that came to mind, but that builds in a fear of being captured and tormented. So it's quite a different thing.
It's too abstract, isn't it? The concept of death or being in that situation is maybe too abstract, too complicated for us to kind of rationalize or compute. So it seems almost not real, I would imagine, when you're in that situation, but you had the fight or flight instinct, and you knew you had to get out.
Yeah, there was. I was told by my kind of eccentric Thai lawyer that. Oh, do you know what they call the defense case in Thai? It translates as the dream. So I guess not much of a possibility, but taking hold. Yeah, a solid 95 or more conviction rate in a Thai court, which has its own entertainment value. The judge, the transcript is not what people say, but it's the judge's interpretation of that, and he reads it into a cassette player, which is then typed up. It's somewhat kind of different from I a friend of mine that I'm still in touch with. I called him John Martin in the book. His name's John. He was released after 20 years and lives in Cambodia now. You know, we're all drawn back to what we fear most. And he was in his trial, which was being part of a drug gang. I'm not summarizing here. This is kind of how the charge read. And there was a blurry photocopy of a black and white picture of indistinguishable characters at a table somewhere in a coffee shop somewhere around town. And after his lawyer was finished, destroying that for the little value it was, who took it, where was it, all this kind of thing, the judge read into the transcript, yes, exhibit number X clearly shows the accused meeting for a drug conference at a coffee shop. So, you're not going to win the case. But it was a day out anyway.
Well, a Thai trial, criminal trial, is not a place where guilt is established. It's a place where sentences is handed out, right? As a sentence is handed out, it's not a place where two sides are
exactly
weighed up.
They have that same thing that is the case in Japan. They have a very high conviction rate, but they do nonetheless like a confession and definitely a guilty plea. So they're pretty flexible in Thailand. You can plead guilty really at the last moment after all the evidence has come in, such as it is. And they'll have the sentence. So if it's a death sentence, it come down to 99 years. What fun. Yeah, those were the days. So it's fortunately, well, I was by myself. If I'd been with anybody else, and the few other Westerners that wanted to come in all dropped out. One actually dropped dead, so that's definitely out. It was because I think, what human nature is like. If people see an idea, they watch something on the tube, whichever kind. Oh, yes, we can do that. But when something hasn't been done, and the few apocryphal stories about it that are around are all dismal failures, even some who didn't get over the wall, but turned themselves in after spending a few hours roaming around trying to figure a way. The one set of those guys, Bangkok street gang, 4 of them were put in the punishment. It's not a cell, it's a coat locker, really, half size, and dragged out every day for a beating and died within 2 or 3 months. So that was off-putting to most of the others. But, here's the point in essence. If you're James, if you ever find yourself having to escape, think carefully whether you want the comfort of being with somebody else, because it will slow you down immeasurably. You'll find some obstacle, and then there'll be a discussion about it. There'll be, naturally enough, a dispute about it. When I got to the outer wall, there was an inner moat as well as an outer one. The outer one was very big, about 20 meters, but the inner one was perhaps only 2 or 2.5, but it was, never mind, it was full of turds bobbing around in there and had the name Mars Bar Creek. It was tangled with barbed wire as well. So there was no way of getting my ladder, which was by then very long. I joined two together. Couldn't get it over the other side. Had to work out a way to do it. I did in the end. Won't go into it, but if I'd been sitting there arguing with the last person to drop out of it, my Viking friend, Swedish Sten, he dawn would have, I mean, we would have been too late.
But also, David, I think for me, the most beautiful part of the plan was the umbrella at the end, which you popped open, and maybe that earlier visit to church, something connected there, and the heavens opened and the rain started to pour down a little bit. Or if there were two of you at that point, or God forbid, three of you,
all huddling under an umbrella.
Oh, huddling under one umbrella.
That would have been a sight that would have triggered some response, I think. Whereas just one person wearing prison officer's khaki pants, and that's all you can see under the umbrella. It's kind of, and not, ambling along. Never run. No, never run. Cats don't notice something that's not moving terribly well, but any animal will see something that's moving, and I think humans are not much different. So I was telling myself, slow down, whatever's going to happen will. And in fact, I think it was one of the prisons divided into dans, buildings, and they my kind of personal guard, as it were, who used to take my Visa card out and withdraw cash from time to time for not less 10%. It was reasonable. I passed him, and have you ever seen somebody walking in front of you? You don't know who that person is, but there's something familiar about their lope or gait or way of walking. And I think he got that kind of feeling because he was sort of looking around trying to, this doesn't belong here, what I'm seeing, but it seems familiar. But I even climbed over the pedestrian bridge that crosses the airport highway going out, and turned around to have a little look back, and just asked myself, why are they staying? Why? It is a little society, a little world. Many of the people from those days that I caught up with, who transferred back to their home countries, to modern Western prisons, found the experience of being in a modern prison very depressing by comparison. And I guess that's because when you're in there, especially if you're part of a kind of subgroup, as the what did they call us? The white trash.
Frankie Knock.
Yeah. You're fighting on your own little cause, so that when you get food or you manage to set up a little kitchen somewhere, every day is a victory when you get small things. Whereas if you're in a big prison and they're handing you the food and making a long fuss about what you can have and can't have, whereas in Taiwan, they didn't see themselves as corrupt. I mean, you've obviously lived there long enough to know that taking money from somebody who's got it in exchange for overlooking a rule is not, this is the way I see it in the Thai mind, it's nothing to do with corruption. It's favoring the lucky, and because they must be lucky or they wouldn't have money. So in taking it, you're joining their little world a bit, and that luck might rub off. Yeah, you know how luck is a massive staple of the mindset in Asia generally, and Bangkok particular. Whereas you couldn't approach any of them and ask them to assist in some escape by any way, apart from the fact that it would involve a lot of people, because one guard couldn't possibly do anything to get you out of there. No, especially a foreigner, or really anybody. No, I did have, out of the 23 plans that I abandoned, one of them did involve, unwittingly, a guard who was having his car repaired in the auto shop within the prison. The idea is I get sealed in some compartment in the back of the van, and then people get me out of it when it's driven away. But yeah, I didn't really like the idea of relying on anybody for anything, and there's no secrets. Everything would come out, and secrecy is another massive part of succeeding in anything like this. But you mentioned the Almighty and the holy rain that fell upon me. Later in years to come, I would find that light rain was merely the spittle of the laughing gods, because they had worse planned for me as time went on. And indeed, I suppose in some ways, my experiences in prison in Pakistan was worse in many ways. I don't mean from a violence point of view. I mean, getting arrested was awful. And, you know, James, you should never ask yourself, and viewers, I really wonder what such and such would be like. It seems too awful to even contemplate. The gods in their entertainment will provide you with that answer, but not in a way that's at all pleasant. So perhaps never ask yourself that. But that was whereas in Thailand, it was a matter of overcoming some physical barriers. It was in Karachi. It wasn't that. In some ways, after when you go to court in Karachi, yeah, by the way, all the proceedings are in English, a little legacy of the Raj. They have a class system within Pakistan prisons, A, B, and C. And even if you're B class, which is what educated, tax-paying, I don't know, accustomed to a different lifestyle is the wording, but usually done with a bit of a bribe, but it can be obtained otherwise. So if you're a B class, as I was, there would be no chains or handcuffs in a court appearance, and I'd have my own guard again. And I'd usually send him to do a bit of shopping so that he could profit from the day and save me some time. But wandering around outside the front of the court, I could have easily been picked up. But I would be picked up by my new friends, wouldn't I? And they would take me someplace safe. And that safety, I would almost certainly find, would be a prison of another kind, as they decided that they would try and rinse me out for that which the prison failed to do. So, yeah, that was, as far as the gods were concerned, the worst was yet to come.
Okay, so Pakistan was a far worse experience than Bangkok in terms of brutality, let's say.
Oh, it's certainly. I mean, I went to a couple of the hangings. They used to sell tickets, but and they took some care with it. There was a series of sandbags which could be attached to the ankles, because there was a kind of a formula for the prisoner would be weighed, and then the shortfall in the calculation with the drop. Who was that famous British executioner? Pierpont was his name.
There was the long drop and the short drop. I read in pirate folklore, where I think the short drop is less painful, but the long drop is more painful, or it's the other way around. I can't quite remember. But if they're putting sandbags on the feet, they're probably looking for a speedier kind of execution. So,
yeah. And it was a case, and I think sometimes they get it wrong. I believe, I haven't seen the video, that when Saddam Hussein was hanged, he was actually decapitated through perhaps somebody wanting it to be over with quickly. Well, I guess it certainly was. But don't you think he went to his death with some dignity? I don't know if you've seen him in the last moments of his life, but he wasn't. I suppose if you live like that, having directly caused the death of thousands of Kurds by gas, and God knows how many others, and his two, Uday and Usay, or whatever his horrible sons were named, they were bastards of their own. So surrounded by that world, I guess you're not really terribly surprised when your power leaves you that you're going to be executed. I suppose that could be worse.
It was you just made me think of a story. We were talking about the executioner at the Bangkok prison, and there was a movie made about him and a book written about the last executioner. And there was one story I just thought of where he was a devout Buddhist. He loved rock and roll. Apparently, he was a nice guy, but he had to kill people, and it weighed on his conscience. And there was this one time he was executing a woman who had she committed an awful crime. She'd been smuggling drugs, but the drugs had gone in the baby, I think, and it was swallowed and they'd spilled and died. It was a horrible death, anyway. But he shot her through the heart, which was the way they did it, and she didn't die. And she just kept screaming. She just kept screaming at him these obscenities, and shot her again in the heart. Still didn't die. And it later turned out that she had this rare condition where the heart was on the other side of the body.
Oh, I see.
It was just a flesh wound.
Yeah, but not particularly pleasant one, I suppose.
No, not for him or her or anybody. But yeah,
isn't it a myth that is always circulated that in tradition of hanging anyway, if an execution, if the attempt to kill somebody fails 3 times, that you let them go. I don't know. There's a shred of truth in that. I believe there was an unusual case in the United States where, you're going to get unusual cases because there's so many trials and things, where how did it work? Oh yeah, this guy had supposedly killed a farmer next door. He was convicted of it. He said he was always innocent. And he charged the hangman on the gallows, knocked him off the gallows. The hangman breaks his neck. So the whole proceeding stopped while he's charged and goes to trial for killing the hangman. Meanwhile, as he's facing that, somebody comes forward with evidence that reveals the true killer of the farmer next door. So he's then pardoned for that by the state governor. Yeah, but he doesn't do so well on killing the hangman, and he's convicted of that and executed. But his defense was an interesting one. It was his defense was that of self-defense. He said that being an innocent man, when somebody was unjustly about to execute him, he was entitled to defend himself from that.
It's an excellent angle.
And didn't do him any good. No. So let's swing back from executions for a minute.
Yeah, I wanted to go way back, actually. Obviously, you were born in London and came to Australia when you're still quite young. I think like 6 or 7, maybe even younger.
Well, the one that I remember was when I was about 6 or 7. Although I was, I think, 3 the first time. I still have some old 8mm color footage, Kodachrome, of baby David falling down a lot trying to walk in Hyde Park, while my father offers me, I thought it was a big piece of paper, but it was a lure to get me to stand up. But it was actually an old £5 note. They were quite big
wow.
in a million years ago. So there I am lunging towards this thing, you know, a habit that I found hard to break for about 40 years.
I'm just picturing that Nirvana Nevermind cover with the baby going for the dollar bill, you know, on the cover. But that was
now when I was 6, I took.
You should digitalize that if you still have it and share it on YouTube. That's a wonderful image.
Well, it's surprising how well Kodachrome lasts. So it's the color's still there after, you know, whatever it is, over 60 years. But I remember something from the journey on the ship called Orsova from Southampton to, did it go into Melbourne? I think it did, when I was about 6. On the voyage over, there was a terrible storm. And I put on my, I have a memory of it, a kind of yellow sou'wester or something like that, and managed to open the very heavy steel door and got out and made my way to the front of the ship. And sort of forward channeling Titanic, I got onto the bow somehow, even though I got blown over half a dozen times just by the waves splashing over the front. My mother, who was a very relaxed sort of person in her own nutty way, was busy entertaining friends in the first class lounge, which had big windows facing the front of the ship. And somebody did remark, "Look, there's some tiny kid out there. He's going to get himself killed. Look, down he goes again. Oh no, he's got back up," you know. And it was not really so easy to reach the prow of a ship. It's not like in the movies. I mean, there's lots of barriers. But no, I was doing pretty well. I like the idea of being thrown up in the air by the thing going up and down. And my mother thought it could only be me. And there was some heroic saying. I'm lucky they didn't lose one of the crew on that. I could see them coming towards me and thinking, "Oh, it's a bit dangerous for them to be doing this." But I didn't have any fear at all. And I since read that this is a condition that some people have, where you have a very low fear reaction, and it's not necessarily a good thing. If you have a low resting heart rate, that is also somehow tied up with it, and mine's always been about 60 or so. Now, that goes with time. When you get over 50 years old, your perception of risk is stronger. It gets silly in a way. You know, you think, drive to the corner shop and it's going to be a 16-wheeler is going to smash into you. I mean, almost everything bad seems like it's going to happen.
This lack of fear, David, must have been very useful when you found your first vocation as a TV presenter, newsreader in Australia at the age of, I think you were 7 or 8, maybe 9.
No, I was 12,
and 12.
And it was Peter's, which was a brand of ice cream, junior news, and it was 5 minutes before the main news of the evening. And I was the youngest there because they had difficulty finding somebody who could read. They didn't have auto cues, so you had to memorize half a paragraph and then read very quickly the next bit, and then keep it within time. And more annoyingly, that little name card, it said David McMillan. And I had trouble pronouncing the Mc and McMillan because it's not McMillan anyway. But behind that, there were 3 lights, red, green, and a white one, which meant, steady as she goes. But red, slow down, green, speed it up a bit. So it was perhaps a bit of a burden for most kids to sight read ahead and then not look at these flashing lights that were going on. But I don't know. I was lucky like that. I read books from the age of about 7 onwards, I think, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like Dr. Dolittle, because it was full of travel and travel by unusual means and all that kind of thing. And I remember something, I was emotionally affected by books too. There's one called, it's a kid's book called Cricket in Times Square. And it had a very sad ending, obviously, for the cricket, I guess. And I'd finished the book and I'd put it down, and I'm 7 years old or so, 8. And I go back to where the adults are, and I'm really crying about this. And my stepfather at the time said, "Oh, well, look, I'm sorry, I must have embarrassed you when you came in the room." It wasn't that, I read a book and it made me sad. But nobody could believe in the adult world that that was the case. And I found too, when at 12, when I was doing the TV news, it was kind of a grown-up-ish sort of thing, you know, in the sense that you're doing something, getting paid reasonably well for it. It was, look, a different world. For a kid to be doing something like that meant he was in for a tough time at school. They just didn't like somebody showing off on television. So I had to kind of find a defensive way at that. But I think too,
how did you find David, sorry, that defensive way? I would imagine probably finding one of the tougher kids and becoming friends with them. Was that
yeah.
a strategy, or how did you handle that?
No, I had to have a group.
Yeah.
I got a little kind of club around me. Now, they weren't particularly good, but they had numbers on their side. And I even found a parallel here within prisons. From a couple of times I've had the most feared person in the jail. There were in an Australian one, there was George Zachariah, who was a kickboxing champion. Now, I knew, and a few of the other Lebanese knew, that he was all show. You know, he had quite a, within the jail anyway. I mean, if it was a match, he could play because there's rules and nothing. But where it's very open-ended, and jail killers, they actually aren't necessarily put off by somebody who's an expert. They regard that as a weakness, that they found that out, that person's declared themselves. So it'll be a brick from behind, or a kitchen knife in the back. In the criminal killing world, it's not a matter of really matching skill levels or strength the way you would in a proper organized competition. So I knew that George wouldn't be any good if it actually came to it, but he was a great scarecrow. And after all, it's prevention that you want.
Deterrent,
if something's come to the point where you're then seeking revenge for something, you've failed, because the thing that you were trying to stop. And I've always seen that way. I should go back a bit, because while I was doing the news, I fell in love with my co-presenter, Leslie Billy. She was 17, and she used to say, "David, if only you were older," or all that. And I go, "Look, it's all right by me, but we can work on that." But I found the adult world unreliable, and I was always trying to figure a way of getting control of my own life. And I guess I can sum it up the effects within a couple of years after that. By the age of 14, one of my stepfathers was a person who my mother regarded as a terrible influence, not because he was a bad person, but because of these factors. He was a respected gynecologist, often difficult patients, challenging patients would be referred to him. But he was also provided abortions in a state where abortion was illegal. To do that on an ongoing basis means he was paid in cash, and his secretary, an extraordinary woman, Peggy Berman, a kind of Madame Fixer extraordinaire, she used to run everything, including paying off the cops. And that all came to a head, and the group of 7 doctors who were qualified doctors doing the abortions decided to throw it to the courts. And it came out how much they were paying. It was the vice squad of all squads that was taking the kickbacks. So Jim Troop was his name, the doctor. He'd come home every night with a bag full of cash, $50 notes, which was the highest denomination at the time, all wadded up in there. And yet at the weekends, lots of Tony friends would come around, and there would be a dinner party, and he was respected. The whole group of them were. And now they were fighting against the authorities. Ended up the police went to jail. They were exonerated, and the laws were changed. So my mother later realized that here was I at a very formative stage where the law means nothing, because my experience of it is there to be broken if it's wrong. The qualified people that you respect were breaking the law. Perforce, they were dealing in cash because it was underground. And it really flipped the standard of everything. So really from that age, I disregarded in fact, all men really as mostly unreliable, authority figures whose power was just a shell. And if I was any kind of person, I would be able to overcome that by deviousness and secrecy. And then I discovered drug smuggling. It seemed an extraordinary gift from heaven that as something with some substance, which is at the one moment on a shelf in a chemist shop, pharmacy, it could be on the other hand an illegal thing, and particularly illegal, made worse somehow, by crossing this artificial line drawn on a map. It seemed
particularly, David, when you look back to, as you have to, when you look back to the Harrison Act and the United States, and the reasons these laws came into existence, which were purely kind of power-driven and racism-driven. They didn't like the Chinese, so they outlawed opium. They didn't like the Mexicans, so they outlawed marijuana.
Yeah, and I think it was a period.
Cocaine-raised Negroes and all this kind of thing. And similar to abortion, it's an ethical, moral question rather than a black and white crime. So I can see you see the grey area there and how that had affected you as a young man.
Oh, definitely. I had really, and it was a very, in the late 60s and early 70s, it was a kind of a revolutionary time. It was kind of the end of the hippie era. Well, the hippie era went until, say, 72, but it was around then. And for young people, it was kind of expected that you be quite rebellious. And we all imagined that we would be running the world. Years later, I ran across some schoolmates who had came to have jobs like one became an attorney general and another one was a lawmaker. And I'd say, you shithead, what was all that talk when we were kids? I mean, was that just all a load of rubbish? Yeah, well, I work from within, David. It's not easy, but I like to think I'm making a difference. You're not making any fucking difference. Anyway, and they'd look at me and say, well, better than your way. Look what happened to you, But, others will say, look, I'm just dressing all up these motivations in fancy talk. You're just a greedy bastard who saw a profit and wanted the money. Perhaps so. Who knows what our underlying motives are? But if somebody was, if I was as gleeful at holding on to money as that suggests, I was never very good at keeping it. But again, people say, well, like any like a swindler, he always blows his wad as soon as and goes out looking for another swindle to make. So it's easily to be argued the other way. And I do think, looking back, that I could have done many more things that would have been a much happier life, a more productive life. After all, what was I? Nothing more than a trader, really. But
as it happens, David, you moved from Australia. I want to move towards the cinema.
That was a funny place.
Was this showing adult content, or was it just a regular cinema?
It was a kind of unique place. Yeah, it was literally underground, a relatively small 350-seater cinema, and it had during the school holidays kids movies during the day, and then soft porn at night, usually like some German production of the Schoolgirl Report, number 123.
So you had to get the kids out before the
indeed, it was quite
the next shift.
When I got the job, the boss said, well, look, David, you look a bit skinny, but you've got to be able to control sometimes difficult situations down there. I mean, we don't want the booking clerks, they're all girls. We don't want them being messed with by, some of the dirty old grots that come in. And when they got the kids thing on, you've got to watch over the crossover group. I said, look, could have been written for me, this job. And I sported when you're showing people to a seat or something, you have a torch. I went and I bought a kind of cheap one that was metal, but bashed it up. I did everything but put a set of teeth in there. So it looked like this torch had been used to deal with problems before. And I'd see troublemakers looking at this thing thinking, yeah. And often fathers would come down with a whole passel of kids they'd scooped up from two families or something. They wanted to get rid of them. And they said to me, oh, look, you just look after them for a couple of hours while they watch the cartoon cycle. In London too, there used to be a cinema in the centre that had, it wasn't 24 hours, but it was a continuous show of Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny. And so I'd say to the dads, no, look, it'd be like having two jobs, having to look after your kids as well. I'm not paid for two jobs. 10 minutes later, I'm counting now. Right. All right, kids, your fucking party's over now. This is Uncle Nasty. Get in there and watch the thing. And if you want to pee, hold it. All of that. So I'd have to scoop up a few that escape out the back, but it was quite, and the booking clerks, the girls there, I mean, they had a sense of humor about the place anyway, but I don't make them feel worse, if anything. I'd say to them, that guy was coming down the stairs. He's going to give you a wedged up, grotty $5 note. Those sweaty palms. He's been thinking about you day and night. The residue of his thoughts is on that money.
Oh my God.
But it was pretty rare that I actually had to hose down a seat or anything like that.
But by this time, you're a few years older, and
yeah. And I went into advertising after that, which was another insane sort of world.
And I wanted to ask about the co-presenter as well, who was 17 while you were 12. Is there any kind of
any juicy bits to the story?
I just petered out after the news reading.
No, we had I think our last time together was it was a telethon, a charity thing, and we were doing that, and they were really toying with me, the crew. You know, you had to read out that, you know, John Smith has donated, you know, $10. Thank you, John. Yeah. No, they wouldn't give me those ones, not the easy ones. I'd get, it seemed to be kids. Little Zbigniew Zapakonsnowski Bumstein, Pastor Zula, has donated 3 cents. I thought, this guy's going to get, I can't read through this. So they took me off. I thought the only way out of this being stuck to the chair for the telethon is to have a go at the kids. And they liked filler, so they were quite happy when I was, you know, turning to Leslie and saying, Leslie, I think I can say, in all honesty, and the telethon will understand this, because I'm a kid and I can talk to the other kids who are ringing up promising, you know, threepence or, you know, sixpence or whatever it might be. Listen, kid, it costs more to collect this than it does to actually give it. So go to mum and dad and squeeze them for a bit. Well, anyway, they took me off after that one, so I got out of it.
So
but Leslie and I,
television into cinema.
Well, I mean, they took me off that day, not off the show. I think Leslie, there was no. There was nowhere to go at that age, but somebody came down whose boyfriend was a prison officer, and I made some speech. I didn't know them, met him, about how at least the criminals had the guts to go out and do something rather than hiding, masking their authority with behind a uniform, yak, you know, standard, you know, Revolution Now 101 speech about authority. But because of that, they kind of looked at me and thought, maybe. And I got introduced. And a lot of these were retired safecrackers, or not so retired. They still did the odd job. And this was technical, which I was interested in, those kind of things. And and it was a real cat and mouse thing between the safecrackers and the safe makers. And the police, of course. Now, back in those days, the police in Melbourne were very vicious. I mean, they killed people, you know, while questioning them. Not, you know, like every day, not routinely, but somebody that they'd had enough of, you know, they would. So, just as a quick example, if they got into a safe in a particular way, the safe makers would change the mechanism. They'd put in, if they were using heat to get through the front, they'd put in soft copper bars that the heat would melt and drop steel pins down into the side. And so they'd get around that problem and others. Well, they had a lot of money, but and drugs seemed to be. Now, here's the thing with drugs: it was, of course, standard in those days that, yeah, turn on, try everything. Yeah, you know, be careful of the dangerous things where you can get yourself a raging habit. But everybody knows that. Who could? I mean, nobody started using heroin would think, that's nice. And somebody else said, well, it's very Moorish, I'm told. You know, it was clearly labeled, you know, diabolical, and you couldn't be an innocent in that field. But and the safecrackers more or less said, you know, oh no, we don't really want to get into that heavy stuff like that. You know, we've had friends who've been messed up by that thing. You know, they never really got out of it and all that. But they didn't really think. So I went over and got some hash from India, and it was the most ludicrous operation. But I was quite effectively the customs officer at Sydney let me go.
Transistor radio stuff for.
Oh, it was
you can take your radio with you, Mr.
He did. He looked around and he was by himself, which they never are these days. And he spun the dial of this huge 1950s Grundig radio, and the dial didn't move up and down. It just kept spinning. And there's nothing else in this suitcase, a couple of pairs of socks and a towel, I think. And it was, I had more than I had 6 kilos to get it. I was jamming. It was all bent at the sides and stank to high heaven. He said, "You're going back to, oh, all right, get your, as you say, radio, we'll call it, shall we? And get going. I don't want to see you back here again." And I'm thinking how clever I am. Well, I'm not thinking I'm that clever. I kind of know that I've really bounced off one here, get anybody else. But those were the good old days where people, I think, were more or less allowed to use their own judgment on these things. They didn't have some enforced partner. They couldn't trust each other to let somebody go because the other guy might use it against me later on, all of that. But here's the point. When I got back to my villainous friends, they were kind of surprised because that was the barrier. You could buy locally. I mean, you'd find somebody there were some Lebanese people who bought in a whole lot of hash once, and then ran around town buying up lottery tickets that people won so they could clean the money up. No, but that was a big thing, and they were already foreign. It was very hard for local crooks to just walk into this international stuff. Where do you get the contacts? But I was kind of from the hippie side, and it was kind of a hippie thing to go to a strange city, a new land, and make contacts, make them from the ground up. I had some loose connection in India with the Hare Krishnas. He was a crook. He ran away from, he was wanted for some armed robberies and ended up in India. Oh, he ended up writing a book about it. Greg David, Shantaram was the book.
Yes.
It took me years to realize that was the same guy whose contacts
really?
I was given, because his mum worked down the cinema. And, we'd ask, "How's he getting on?" "Oh, not so good."
They recently made a film of that, David. It was shot here, Shantaram, or
Johnny
series.
Depp. Yeah. Johnny Depp bought the rights to it years ago, must have passed them on.
Yeah.
Or not. I think he's going to win that case. Public sentiment's in his favor.
I think he's certainly got the public behind him, and he deserves to have them behind him, I think.
I mean,
it's a nasty piece of work.
Very artificial, manipulative arrangements over this thing. She was a shark when she went in with him, and he's a bit soft in the head, I think, but he's a nice guy. Everybody says so. Seems to be. Terrible actor, actually, but still, such a nice guy. Look, we like actors because we like to spend time in their company. So when I got back with this thing, they were kind of surprised that it had all come together. I said, "Yeah, but remember I had to call up and I ran out of money and you sent me more." "Oh, in for a penny, in for a pound." But they were quite kind of vicariously with me as something wouldn't work out and I'd have to do something else. And people were just as careful about communications then. I mean, there was no mobile phones that wouldn't have touched them. They did say
the trip to India was a success. He came back. You got the merchandise. It was distributed through the cinema, through the guys there. Now, was the next trip, you got rid of it.
No, it was kind of divided between my backers and the hippies. But here's the thing: they did say, "But how much was it?" "Oh, well, it's kilos." "Why didn't you get the other stuff?" "What stuff?" "Smack, heroin." "But hang on." Now, I'd had some experience with that. I'd had a few lines from time to time, but it really just threw up all the time and didn't think much of it. Got a headache. But I said to them, "But you're always telling me you don't want to go near that." "Yeah, but it's worth a fortune." "I suppose it is, but all right. But I had no contacts for that either. And and India was not the kind of place you go shopping for that sort of thing. Everybody knew it was from where you are in Thailand. Now, let's cast our little time machine here back to, I'm about 19, am I 20 yet? Something close to that. And this is in 77 or thereabouts. It has only been a couple of years since the very last of the Vietnam War came to a dismal end, and Bangkok had changed. It was supported in many ways as a town by the money that came in with soldiers hour and hour from the US Army, though there were others involved, but not in any great numbers. And the town had sort of run down a bit. Sure, there was a red light district that was there, but it was a bit more dismal. It wasn't as lively, a bit more seedy, a bit more German tourist and drunken American. So take your pick on that score. But the hippies' guide to the world, sort of not so lonely planet, told you to, you've got a couple of choices. You could try and inculcate yourself within a circle of friends that you make. But if you're in a hurry, you go down where you know somebody will be able to get whatever you want. And that's the red light district. And so I went to Pat Pong. But it was quieter than usual. Now, I was fairly young, so I hadn't really perfected any of this as much as one can. But I knew to be a little bit cautious. I wasn't going to go for the first guy I saw, and I didn't like somebody had warned me, the ones who ran around in shorts, who tell you they were with the local football team, but narcs for sure. I don't know what. But I had a pretty good narc nose anyway by then. So I walked down there, not too late at night, some distractive life going on around me. One guy comes up, I get your girl. No, I just didn't like the look of him. I mean, I had a long way to go from girl to what I wanted. So, that was a few jumps. Somebody came up. I don't know why. There was, I should say, I did pick one junkie off the street. But he was a dead end. I knew that even though he got me what I wanted, he would be slaughtered. I knew that this guy was too weak. He wasn't vibrant enough. The next night, this guy was kind of versatile. He wanted to know about other places and things and other countries. He was somebody who wanted to go somewhere. But he was a bit of he had some Frankie Valli 1950s haircut or something. It wasn't quite right, but I couldn't be too fussy. I had to make a few mistakes, and you have to be prepared to trip a few times. And he said, I get your girl, nice girl, young girl. No. So I walk on, and he catches up with me, thinking, all right, play another card. I get you two girls. Oh, I get you boy. And I paused there for a minute because I thought, wow, this guy can really flip on a dime, But no, I don't want that. But he's still down the wrong direction. And he comes up to me and said, whoa, I can see he's desperately thinking, this twisted, sick, foreign bastard, what kind of weird shit does he want? What does he want? Sex with an animal or something? I'll get it, but just tell me, for crying out loud. I need that money in your pocket. You want to get hit in the head? I'll do that. But it's kind of a light bulb goes off in his head. You want Thai stick? Huh? He thinks, thank fuck, why didn't you say so? Well, why didn't I say so? Because I wanted to know the cut of your jib. And so that didn't take too long. And but you have to go through with that first bar. You can't jump. Children gather around. You can't jump into some much deeper, slightly darker world just because you've broken through a bit there. No, you've got to go through with that Thai stick bar, and don't expect it to be too good either. It won't be any stick. Last time it saw a stick was a long time ago. It was just a crappy little bag of regular seedy looking stuff. But back in the back of the car, they seem to materialize over air conditioned. Unique smell, a Bangkok taxi, don't you think, James? It's got that, what is it, frangipani? Is it the flower that's lucky and hanging off the rear view mirror? Anyway, it's got a particular odor.
I had an interesting story about the menthol smell you sometimes smell in a Bangkok taxi. Now, Bangkok has lots of traffic, and often the drivers are stuck in traffic jams. And rather than get out the car, find a toilet, and get back into the taxi, they will wear adult diapers.
Oh, really? Yeah, and just pee themselves.
And these adult diapers have a menthol kind of smell that release.
That's nice.
Sorry to ruin your interpretation.
No.
It could be the Christmas
But you
tree
did summon up back of foreign vehicles experiences over the years, which have a kind of a world of their own. You know, there's a different smell to what do they call it? The Ambassador, an Indian-made local car that has incredibly thick plastic on the seats to protect the, God knows, never been touched by human hand seats underneath. But that's a different world and a different time.
We're derailing from the story. Come on.
Yes. Okay, so I get this stage door Johnny, and he's running around trying to get me. Well, the way that you imagine you're living in a country where everybody naturally cheats at every possible opportunity. This is basic. So how do you make something? Look, if it's a bit of weed, you can smell it. You can. It's too expensive to fake, or you wouldn't bother. But for something that's either a pill or a powder, there needs to be some way of being able to tell at a glance or without too much trouble whether this is a genuine article or complete sting. And there I don't know whether they still do it, believe so, but they have little plastic bottles, and it's got a 5 on the bottom, and this is number 5 grade. Well, there isn't really. There is a number 4, I suppose you could say. But it's also made in a particular way, so it's never compressed. Again, I don't know whether they do this, but the last stage of purification after filtering through charcoal is to dry it out in a huge sphere of glass, and this globe rotates over a low flame and tumbles it. So the resultant powder is not really like a powder exactly. It looks like coffee granules, but white. And if you touch it and press it, it all squashes down. So they put this in a solid little bottle so it can be told. And somebody who's got a kind of sommelier's nose for these things can unscrew it and smell it and know straight away that they've hit pay dirt. But this, Johnny Fontaine is this is out of his world, and I can tell he is, because he's gone back to his boss. And I thought, I don't want somebody who's always referring to somebody else. And if I spend too much money here, boss is going to be interested. I've got to be small time for this guy always. So, and I was left behind someplace, too long. Well, God knows what he did. And, but they're pretty good. I mean, he at least he came back a couple of times, and then I wanted more. So he had to go home and get changed, and he lived in a kind of behind the Metro Hotel, and there's some those, I wouldn't call them little houses, but they're kind of like that. They're all divided up, and they're up on stilts because of the flooding in Bangkok, and but they mostly kept quite clean and so on. Well, he shared a house with a guy, and while he went and put on an even flasher Hawaiian shirt and replaced the plastic Beatles wig that was his hair, the guy that sort of ran this, well, it was really his house, spoke to me very quietly and with a slight American accent. I later learned that he'd driven a lot of the Americans around during the war. And he just said, be a little bit careful of him. If you want to come and see me, you know where I am. I looked around, I saw his wife there keeping a clean house, and he had little kids. I thought, yeah, he hasn't got any money. There's something about him. Don't know what it is. Yeah, I know he's a good one. You know, you just get that feeling. So I had to dump Johnny Fontaine, which I did within the next day, but I went back to him, and Lee had a big old Buick or something from the 60s, which he lovingly, polished up. He wouldn't get rid of it. And it later became his lucky car because he, my friends later on, when I got back with the goods, they said, so you gave virtually all your money to this guy who lived in a rundown dump, and he's going up to Chiang Mai to score up there. And it's, sizable amount. And it took a week, and then it took another week. Yeah. Well, weren't you worried about that? Yeah, I wasn't worried. But I don't know, if you don't extend that reach out, you'll never know. And I'd been stooged a couple of times early on, but by people and places, obvious scammers. And I'd had, by this stage, I'd spent time in Lebanon with friends that I'd made there, and in India, and learned kind of a lot of things. For example, at American Express, you get all these swindlers hanging around there, offering you a special rate to change your money. And they lead you around by a motorcycle taxi, so you're thoroughly confused as to where you are. And you find it. And I said, look, I just want to change some money. Why are we, this is in New Delhi, why are we, but we can do this in a cafe. Why are we in the middle of nowhere, like behind some rundown apartments? No, better nobody see. I'm starting to think, yeah, this is, all right, let's see how they play their hand here. I'm not letting go of this money until, and at the moment the transaction's going ahead, and I'm sunk my hand around the rupees, and he's sunk his hand around my dollars. A guy comes out of nowhere screaming, oh, you're at it again, you guys, always doing your illegal business behind my, I'm calling the police this time. I've had enough of this. I said, you get out of here. Quickly. So the guys go, let's get out of here. Yeah. Just a minute. I sink my grip even tighter. I don't let go. Because why? Because, James, the guy coming out complaining isn't doing it in Hindi, he's doing it in English. So who is the intended recipient of this threat, this warning, this motion to get out of Dodge in an instant? Me. So it turns out they've switched the money. They've left the big notes on the outside and small notes on the inside. Oh, they should have made it paper. I don't know why they bothered with notes. But anyway, I've called them things, and then they've counter threat in a very weak way, but minutes later we're in some cafe somewhere saying, no, we were testing you. Yeah, we're a little club and we do all sorts of things, we can manage it, but I just wanted to find. Now I was still dealing with shoeshine boys to get my hash at that stage, so I desperately needed somebody a bit better, but these were not I knew these were not the guys.
That's what I was going to ask, David, because the strategy, like most guys would have, I probably would have at 19 or 20 years old in a new town where I was looking to score, would be to perhaps meet some like expats or Westerners or people of my own kind of ilk and naively go through that route. But I think sourcing locally was a better strategy. Even though you had the risk factor, you were able to judge character.
You need to be a bit more relaxed. The reason I think most people go for expats is because they feel they can talk to them. They're overlooking the fact that that person is living there, earns his living there, fleecing visiting foreigners who have to go back because visas expire and times run out. Is a much cheaper way, a much better way of earning a living than actually, organizing yourself and perhaps taking risks by getting involved in drugs or some other thing that you might want. They that I met in actually Delhi an American couple, and that's what they did. They just preyed on. They sold little bits of hash to foreign visitors, and then they'd work on them and set them up for a much bigger sting if they could do it. But they never held good to anything. And I always came to ask myself, what is it about a person who abandons his own country and takes up life in a world where simply by nationality he's in the exceptional category? Or so I did, when dealing with expats, and you'd know this backwards. You know that if you meet another expat and for whatever reason you haven't come across him or her previously, you want to see how they've woven their way into this new community and what they do. And if it's not quite right, if they haven't put in proper roots, if they haven't found something that at a glance seems to, make sense of how they can live, if they're just on the fringes, I'm sure you'd be wary yourself of such people. That there are some that are kind of outcasts in their own land because they were never any good there. They'd burnt every bridge possible. Mum and dad, friends, people they meet, there's nowhere left to go. They can't walk down Main Street where they came from because, somebody said, "There you are, you shithead," and go after them. There are a lot of in the expat world who are kind of fringe people that just prey on the suckers that come over from, and that's their only ticket, that they happen to be from that country. I met quite a few of them.
There was a character in the film who was, according to the film, an ex-lord, David.
Well, he's a true person. He was
in the
while he was alive.
Yeah,
that's Lord Tony Moynihan. He, I was through one thing or another, I ended up with this as a contact for the Philippines, and I wanted to have him get. I'd organized some Thai sticks to come through to the Philippines by container, and I wanted him to swap them around in the containers so then they could go to their next point, whether it was Europe or Australia or wherever, having appeared to come from somewhere else, like Japan, which is very low on the risk of source countries. It seemed like a perfectly sensible bit of business that he should be able to do. But I didn't like he was a kind of disgraced hereditary lord who'd been tangled up in some fraud here in London and left under a cloud. Some thought he was dead, but no, he turned up there, and he was in thick with Marcos. So, well, he'd like to make you believe that he was. I was not, even though my arrival was heralded, I was not picked up at the airport. No special arrangements were made. But by the time I arrived in his office, and as I walked through the door, it is the office of this house, Lord Tony was laying it on thick with a fake telephone call. "Yes, General. Of course, my old chap. Certainly. Oh, the bang-bangs. Oh, we've got warehouses full of those, as you know." I thought, oh, good. Started already, and I haven't even sat down. He had a daughter who ended up Aurora. I met her when she was just a tiny thing, and she ended up dead in a feet hanging out of a dumpster in the back of Manila somewhere. But Lord Tony had he didn't want to do my bit of business. And why? he would have made good money. What he had in mind for me was a kind of a sting operation. He took me to see the cockfights down where all these Chinese mad gamblers, perhaps there's 2,000 of them in this stadium. I don't think they could even see the outcome of the fight, just have to judge it from the reaction of those around them. He wanted me to rig the cockfight so that his bird would win and we'd make a fortune from that. Well, you can't do that, but you might be able to make sure your bird loses. But it's a very fine thing. They, as you know, they have these big blades attached to their feet. It's a gruesome, grisly business. If you judge it wrong, the idea was to put they have a kind of scraggy neck, a bit like mine. You put a capsule in there and it's radio linked and it explodes and severs the jugular, so you can rely on them going down pretty quickly. So you sit there, not front center of stage, but back a bit and trigger it at an opportune moment. But I was saying to him, I said, this is still terribly risky. The other bird could slice his head off within 0.5 of a second after the start game goes, So it's not a certainty. Oh, don't worry about that. I can offload the bets in there. He even had some show money, for part of it. And I realized, I started to learn then. I was tipped off, by the way, as to his intentions. He would, the first one, no matter, I wouldn't be able to tell one bird from another, really, if they looked a bit the same. Whatever happened, yeah, it worked very well. Now we go for the big one. He wanted me to put up £250,000 into this thing. And the second one, of course, there would be no betting. In fact, I doubt very much whether there'd be betting in the first place. All there would be was some shill in the audience going, round eye, white man, oh, what do you do? Electronic thing in hand, all that, I'd be descended upon. I certainly wouldn't get the money back. The only reason I'd walk out of there alive is if he thought I might settle up for another one, I guess. And I said to him as much. I said, look, Tony, I don't know really what your game is here, but it's all flakery and nonsense. If you do what I'm saying, and I know you can do it, I don't know what their reluctance is. A con artist really loves the moment of pulling the wool over somebody's eyes. They're addicted to that. It's a super drug to them. They really enjoy that more than anything. So they make their lives much more difficult than they need be. He also, worst thing about old fraud Tony was that he was an unrecalcitrant informer. He would pretend to be working if he was approached by the authorities, he'd be their man. If it was another bunch of authorities, he'd be their man. But he'd also, because we'd never done any business, or it wouldn't have mattered if we'd had, I found myself arrested in a very dangerous case. There were no drugs involved, but that only makes it worse. There was no real evidence, but that only makes it worse. It means the fight's going to go on because this task force had been crawling around us for over 2 years, spent a lot of money. They couldn't afford to lose the big case. They ran in at the wrong moment. They descended on the Thai courier at the wrong moment. Nobody had anything. So it became a vicious fight, this long trial. Lord Tony had sent somebody over to pose as a helicopter pilot to free us all from prison. But the funny thing was, he wasn't even the first person that had offered that. Back at the time, I think 3 different people had offered helicopters out. We would have needed air traffic control. There have been so many, competing airlines wanting to take us out of there. What did he want for that? $250,000, I think. But he was a complete fraud. He wasn't a helicopter pilot. He wasn't from former SAS. He was just another fraudster. And Lord Tony, being the master fraudster, had convinced this guy, Percival, to go in there, clean us out. And to what point? Because Lord Tony wouldn't be getting anything out of it. He was pleasing his friends in the Australian Federal Police and offering this a little favor. And it worked in that sense. I'd already been in a Supermax prison, held there after my wife and my business partner's wife, Michael's wife, Mari, had both died in a prison fire, being held on remand. They'd put them in with an informer who was unfortunately an arsonist at the same time. So when the helicopter thing came up, it was planned from the beginning that it would, the police would step out of the shadows and say, got you, we offered this thing and this is the man in the middle. They actually charged him as well, even though all the contacts he'd been given by Lord Tony for getting a helicopter, getting equipment, the anti-bugging guy who was brought in, who actually put bugs in rather than look for bugs that had been planted, they were all police. And I was charged with, well, it was going to be attempted escape, but there was no escape. And so it was some long-winded conspiracy to pervert the course of justice by fleeing the jurisdiction and no longer being available for trial. And that actually added to my sentence back at the time. But here, again, the fraudsters, they become much easier to spot, I suppose.
There was a comment you made in one of the broadcasts, which I identified with. When somebody is trying to, play you, and you know that they're trying to play you, sometimes it's kind of fun just to go along with it and just to kind of keep them performing, as it were, with their elaborate plan of fraud or deception or whatever. Sometimes that's a better strategy, and than to confront the person and just say straight up, that's, I don't.
Well, I mean, of course, you have to set yourself limits within this. Yeah, it's certainly entertaining. I think if you had time on your hands, you could probably, having identified them for what they are, give them even greater and greater little hurdles to overcome. Or something that would bring forth more and more implausible explanations as to why such and such couldn't be or could be done, and really, or you try and make them bring in other characters. Yeah, I like your plan, but what's missing is we need a woman who can tap dance, because they're all big tap dancers, something like that. And if that gets provided, yes, but the only fly in the ointment is the other people. They got this sort of prejudices, and the only people they really like to talk to is a black hunchback dwarf with an Alaskan background. And you keep upping the ante there, and they keep producing these people. The good fraudster has no self-doubt, so they'll keep going for a while. But on other times, I mean, I don't have to tell you, imagine being in such proximity to very high quality heroin, certainly tempting, sniffing. I'll just chop up a little. Well, knocks your socks off. No. I get stuck in a hotel room and having little lines here and there. And I got back, put everything away, and woke up in the middle of the night. Oh, I don't feel right. I think I'm coming down with a cold. Something. Irritating legs keep jumping up and down. Make a sandwich. I can't eat anything. Whiskey. Rocket fuel. I don't know what's that. I'll get some of that stuff. That'll. And then I, realize for the first time I've given myself a habit. So, the most sensible thing is like put it somewhere it's too much trouble to go and get to, though that has got a broad definition of what too much trouble is, which I'll explain in a minute. But the first time, a few fistfuls of Xanax, slept it off for 3 days, and the worst was over. I mean, people will, because it works in court, will often say, oh, I did these horrible things because of my drug habit. I think it would be more revealing to ask how it was, given the cost of it, they could get themselves one, which takes at least 4 or 5 weeks to do properly, which would have meant an expenditure of several thousand. Surely you were getting up to bold and ugly mischief to get all your money before you had enough money to afford all the drugs that you say now were the driving force behind it. But it, as an old crook said to me, you know, the people who moan about the drugs led me to it, and the people who spoil it for everybody else. He meant the majority who can handle their intoxicants. They don't run around getting drunk night and day, or they don't you know, spend all their children's money on a coke habit. I mean, what's a coke? Sure, it's again something that, but you know you can't really enjoy something if it's banging on with it 24/7. You know, you have to be a bit of a connoisseur about your intoxicants, and say, because after all, everything we do that alters our mind chemistry is actually only kind of interesting or good for the first half an hour or so. Then you go chasing that first buzz, and you can never quite catch up with it. It's not quite the same. And that takes a lot of experience to know. And it does seem to be, I mean, this is no, people again will say, oh, David, you're coming up with yet another excuse as to why, you know, what you've done is all right. No, you know, I've always said that I should have been doing something that was, you know, more productive. But along the way, you do notice things about people's behavior that is contrary to the standard view, I guess. Just to round off about being in strange cities and strange places.
We're still waiting, by the way, for the man from Chiang Mai to come back down to Bangkok.
Oh, yeah, he does.
You trusted him, and it took 2-3 weeks.
I know. I really thought I was finished. And, you know, I thought, how can I, from the ground up, get somebody else again? And then there's a phone call, and it's him, you know, and I really stared that phone into the ground a couple of times, you know, when, but he'd been held up there. The guy, I think all those Chiang Mai guys, the mid-level dealers, are under surveillance at some time, so they're pretty cautious when they go and get something. And it came in a big bags with a brand name. They have 4 brand names over there. This was the famous or infamous WO Globe brand, with 2 tigers holding up a globe. But you know, the strange thing is, whenever I'd have to press it to get it into the size of these stereo tuners that I was running, or in a less thing with, that's a whole nother life, in Colombia with the Coke. Sometimes you get double hydrated, really pearly, shiny stuff that doesn't have any grungy after effects. You know, it's you can actually sleep on it in a funny way. But you take all this trouble to get these things around past barriers and borders and case airports and build elaborate devices. And you're shepherding this thing, you're taking care of it. You don't want grubby hands all over it, like the authorities threatening to burn it while giving it to cousin it, or whatever they really do. And a really depressing thing was having to give it to somebody else. Oh, sure, they give you money for it. Yeah. But because then you can take that money and go and do more interesting things. But yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, we're going to cut it for a second. Oh, no. Look, I've taken all this trouble. Well, ruin it. Then what? a couple of times I've said, look, don't you do it. Tell me what the cut is you want. And I'm not doing it with Coke, by the way. It just screws it all together. Do a little bit with a couple of things, but basically not touching that. But the other one, yeah, it can be too strong. So I'd let them do their deal in their minds for what they imagined they were going to cut with, hold back on it a bit, and then do it properly so it was exactly known and measured out. Not because it had some end goal. I just didn't put them fucking my children, if I could put it like that. I didn't. And in fact, if I could have just left it on the shelf there, I would have been perfectly happy. But it was worth a fortune back then too. It was really the equivalent of whatever, whether it was Coke from South America or China White from Asia. You can make about $500,000 on a kilo if you handled it right. It was, but I didn't know what to do with the money. I bought toys. Building cameras I really like to do. I built a 4x5-inch frame, a Linhof Technica out of a aerial photography camera, suction plates to suck. If you have film in a camera and it's just going past its normal mechanism, there'll be tiny imperceptible wrinkles in it or bulge, which will take the focus out ever so slightly. I had one built where there was a vacuum plate which would switch on before you press the shutter and suck it flat, so that you knew it was this never-ending chase for getting the perfect image. And that was a real reward. I like doing those things, but there was a kind of got a letdown on the successful operation. Felt
ultimately, David, it was your next door neighbour, wasn't it, who was the biggest fly in the ointment at this point.
In the earliest, yes, there was two things going against it. It was he was the one who threw my name up, and I bought this house in it was called Brighton. It's actually a suburb of Melbourne, but Australian cities and towns are either named after English places or pointlessly under misunderstood Aboriginal names. I think that's really, yes, really adding. It's one thing to have Whitey come in and slaughter all your ancestors, except for a few. But I think it's really insult into the injury to actually have twisted, garbled versions of what they imagine Aboriginal names are for zones and areas and streets. I'm sure they just, when they got the gist of what was happening, they just made up things. What's he done? He's calling his own house welcome to fuck your sister. Oh, is he? Oh, good. They did use because I've never heard of anybody actually be able to find the origins of so many of those names. But this neighbor, he was an old style copper, and they know, as I know them, they know me. I remember just another flash. I was going to Eurostar once, and I was getting down there and putting my bags through, and that's where these two detectives, plain clothes, were sitting there having a look. I looked at them, and they looked at me, and we both accepted. I was a villain, and they were cops. And I looked at them with a certain kind of professional exchange of compliments, which meant, and they accepted that, yeah, not today. Yeah. We can get your kind any, at our leisure. You can go about whatever your business is today. And it's very hard. I've always said to smugglers, don't smuggle to within and out of your own countrymen, whoever you are. If you're Italian, don't cross Italian borders. People of the same tribe know each other too well. And it was like that with the neighbor. I was watering the front lawn or something. He was making some excuse to do something or other, his front shrubbery on the pavement. And so, what do you do? He said, restaurant business, awful hours. God, yeah, I see you get in late. I thought, you shithead. And then he started talking about kind of neighborhood watch drugs thing. I thought, what's this leading to? And he sort of I knew he was a cop, or maybe as bad as, an amateur cop who'd be phoning up. But they didn't really act on his hunches because he said that. But it was only when that matched with, I'd imported a car from the United States, which was a ridiculous thing to do. It looked like a 1939 Bugatti Royale, a Clinic, and hadn't thought what it would mean to import such an expensive car. I tried to reduce the value of it, only this made it worse. So I ended up being investigated for that, under a phony name, of course. But we used to use the Bearcat 210s to listen to police undercover operations in those days. And it was quite a fun thing. You tune in on them watching somebody and you try and save them. But James, it's not so easy to save somebody who's already riddled with paranoia over what they're doing. You run up to them and say, "Hello, come here. Look. Just a tip. Those guys at that table, they're policemen. There's 3 in the car park. Whatever the hell you're up to, and I kind of know what you're up to because it's some kind of hooky stolen gear. Let's not make it today, shall we? Go home and have a think about it. They're all over you." They would react to this news in a horrendous way. They'd think you're a raving lunatic, or you are actually a policeman trying to entrap them. It's very hard to save somebody from the fate that befalls them. But I guess people just don't listen to advice no matter where it comes from, do they? For a while after I retired, I ended up sort of giving little bits of advice to scallywags who were up to various bits of mischief. But although that was appreciated, it was always so doom-laden because, one set of people had a young couple on board a ship that was doing a cruise from Caribbean and coming back to England. And when I heard it, when I was asked about it, it's a cruise ship, but the kind of cruises where 90% of those on board are over 65. Well, I suppose so. And how old are these ones you've sent? Please tell me they're at least over 50. No, they're in their 20s. Because on the ship, they've got a security section there, look after the oldies having conniptions in the corridors or something like that, or some gin rummy fight that breaks out. If they get a young couple on board who just don't seem to belong there, and sure enough, this couple were fingered for the jump at Southampton, and it worked out a perfectly good way where they could get off at Cape Verde Islands and take the stuff off there, leave it there, and come back another way through Spain. No. I got out of that advising business because so many of the bad predictions were coming true. They started to feel like somehow I'd brought that into to happen. But and that's why I retired, really. But it's not when you've kind of known it's not so easy to do. Not for the silly reason that some people think that your co-villains will say, "Oh, you can't retire. You're worth too much money." It won't. That doesn't mean anything. Nobody does that. You can't make somebody work under duress. But
the big boat, David, idea is not such a bad one. I remember traveling as a passenger on a cargo ship from Port Klang in Malaysia to Hamburg.
Right.
And it was 3 weeks at sea, and I was the only passenger. They gave me the purser's cabin, and the immigration was just a little guy in a shed. He stamped my passport, and there was no baggage inspection whatsoever. I just walked straight through, rucksack on my back, up like the ladder into the ship. 3 weeks later, arrived at Hamburg in Germany. Nobody checked my bag. They stamped my passport on the boat, and then I just got in a taxi and off I went. And that was probably 2008, 2007. So,
sorry, which was your departure point again?
Port Klang, which is on the Malacca Straits in Malaysia.
Okay, well,
They're not
look,
too
I don't
far
think
from
that
Kuala Lumpur, but
that's true. I
I
was going to say it's not. I think probably the German authorities are rather oblivious as to where you come from,
I don't
and
think they even
nothing
knew I
phases.
was there. I wasn't flagged.
No.
But I could see on a cruise ship, you would stick out a lot more. Yeah.
I had a friend who used to do for fun, go on cargo boats and other boats. Almost any ship will, if they've got the space, will sell you a ride from anywhere. And I suppose you could probably get on an oil tanker if it was going the right direction. But and I think no, shipping is good. If somebody was going into the contraband cargo business, they would have to forget about airlines. It's just really an impossibility.
Too risky nowadays. You wouldn't.
Massively risky.
Yeah.
You can barely have sun-dried tomatoes on you that contravene some rules, let alone anything else. Whereas all the biggest transporters I knew, certainly from India, Pakistan area, they all had shipping business. And it's the curiosity of that is the smuggler can do quite well out of that because the people who are there, they don't want to be smuggling on behalf of one of their own country. I mean, there's 4 or 5 million people from the Indian subcontinent live in Britain, so you'd expect. No, they don't want their customer to be one of their countrymen at all. They don't trust them, and they have a strange resentment of enriching one of their fellows. It's a peculiar thing. It seems the worst thing anybody can do I found it when living in Pakistan is to make your neighbor wealthy is something that would be unforgivable.
It's not good enough for me to succeed. My friend also must fail, right?
Exactly. So they're quite, and all of the really anything of substance is done by boat now. Not so much. I had a friend in Germany for many years who he was kind of a very small-time independent smuggler, and they can live quite safely. But he'd fallen a couple of times. He'd been jailed in Afghanistan and then later in Pakistan, and I'd met him there. But he found as he got into his 60s, his nerves started to get shot. I remember doing something with him in Colombia. He was a wreck. I mean, he took a lot of Seconal to calm his nerves, and then had a drink as well, and everything at once, just to kind of drown it out. I think when people reach a certain age, the fear does get stronger like that. Maybe that's why generally older people are ignored as couriers. But it's really, it'd just be suicide to send on anybody running around the world. I used to really worry about mine, and this was back in the 80s. I'd be on the same planes, and I just didn't want them having to make a decision. It'd invariably be the wrong one. Oh, David, I saw something, and so I did this, or I fiddled with the packing, or you get rid of them. The best of them, of course, are all fantasists, complete dreamers who somehow live in this Walter Mitty world, and they can take on the personality of somebody quite different. The best of them that I had was he could make himself into I think he's been record producer, a real estate mogul, something else, champion tennis player, all sorts of things. He was very good at it, utterly confident, had no idea really what he was transporting, didn't want to know. He just liked the idea of spending a lot of money traveling around and being big. But as I suited his fantasizing abilities to suit my purpose, when the big trial started, the police used the same fantasizing abilities to suit their purpose. And he rather failed as a witness because the jury asked the judge, is this a policeman? Undercover police? No, it's not that. He's, he's whatever you think he is. And because by the time the police had him for 6 months, and it was, 1981, he'd become Don Johnson from Miami Vice in their hands. They been stubborn about what he was wearing. He wore the Don Johnson outfit. He came into court. He referred to all of the police by their first name. Oh, Phil and I were, doing this and that. He was running on it. And when cornered on something, well, these drug dealers, they have their tricky ways, but we get onto them. Jury are looking like astonished that this could be such a, comedy of a policeman. But when they found out he wasn't even a policeman, that he had plant shops around town, and that he was a courier for me, they just didn't know what to make. I'm still in touch with the declared hippie amongst us, who is Brendan, lives in Mullumbimby, I think, and became a psychological counselor, or I don't know what, something really inappropriate. He was in the big trial with us. I said, Brendan, you've got nothing to worry about. Your case is so ridiculous. It's got so many interesting characters. Like this witness came on that supposedly saw him with 44-gallon drums, no less, dripping over with heroin, and I said to Brendan, there's something about this this guy. He's got one of those. I mean, who calls himself by one name, Miche? He's a raving iron, no doubt. But what? Come on, there's something else. Oh well, he used to dress as a woman. What? When this was all going on, and when he's giving testimony of? Yeah. So he was in like a twin set and pearls or something. Pretty much. He was a member of the Seahorse Club. They like to dress like early 60s sort of Jackie Kennedy outfits. And when you haven't told your lawyer this, it's gold. No, I don't want to really pick on him. But it's not a matter of picking on him. Just tell a lawyer to save it for the end. And so he'd railed out all this stuff about how, what mischief maker Brendan was with all his drugs. And the lawyer just said, of course, you were wearing glasses at the time. They didn't interfere with what you were saying. They had those 3 little spiky things at the edge. You looked like you'd been rumbled. In fact, your whole outfit was something different. When they realized this was, a very flourishy cross-dresser, yeah, that was it. Mind you, with Brendan, he got doubly lucky. One of the prosecutors picked on his mother, and you never do that. They shouldn't have even had her in there. They wanted her for something, and the junior prosecutor leapt up and said, Mrs. Healy, I won't keep you long, but your son had these friends coming over. Did you ever think they were a rather rum lot? And the mother looked like, what am I supposed? I mean, he's my son. He's his friend. And the jury, who like 6 months they've been on this thing, are brooking no shit from anybody. They've become experts in their own mind. Look at this prosecutor. You ask somebody's mother to give evidence against him over something like, because the thing she had to speak about had nothing to do with her. Well, I mean, they came back and acquitted him early like they were out for a week with the rest of us, but they came back after 45 minutes, directed their gaze straight at the prosecutor, said, "Not guilty for Mr. Healy on all counts." So, I mean, juries can become their own man.
Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about.
Well, I wrote Escape. Really, because Stephen Leather, who writes thrillers, had written one about an escape from Bangkok, and I wrote to him saying, "Well, a pity we hadn't met, when you were researching it, because as it happened, I did get out of there." And anyway, when I ran him through what was, he said, "Look, you should write something for it," and I did, but I did it in a rather first writer's indulgent way. I had writers I admired. I had styles I wanted. I didn't want to do, "Oh, I found God in prison and now I'm all good." Or I didn't want to do, "Oh, it's framed and set up and it's all a terrible miscarriage." I thought, I have to actually stand back from this. I'll let the other people I meet, what happens through them, how they speak to me. I won't say anything about my personality, really. And it was too fancy a style, really, to be a good way to write this story. Okay, sure, people who are writers, journalists and whatnot, all loved it. They thought, "Yeah, this is good. I can see what you're doing there," and all that. But it wasn't, I didn't really escape until the very last part of the book. I've been meaning to record it on audio because that's all anybody do. I think any writer today will have to keep an eye on how it will sound, because audiobooks are selling to a certain group that like biographical first-hand accounts and all of that. They really like to hear it spoken to them. But and there was I had a lot of criticism for not telling anything about myself. But I mean, that I'd like to, just to give you an idea, not sometimes conspiracy fiction or something intense where somebody is focused on. John Fowles I always liked as a writer. He wrote The French Lieutenant's Woman, but he also wrote The Magus, which was about a teacher who ends up on an island in Greece and is manipulated his whole life. I thought that's a really good one.
Spezia.
Spetsos or Spezia. Oh yeah, I know. I think that's not it, but it's close. Yeah, and he even revised it a bit. I also like Nabokov as a writer. I always find Lolita hilarious. It's a really sort of comic thing, and it was quite a publishing sensation at the time, in the sense that the American publishers didn't want to touch it. This was, going too far. Some Russian on top of that, who, but it
published in France by the Olympia Press,
exactly.
And it did extremely well, didn't it? And then America jumped on, and Grove Press bought the rights, but.
And filmed twice too. Once by Kubrick and once by Adrian Lyne, with Jeremy Irons playing Humbert.
And it is funny. It is funny. There's that line I always remember. My mother died when I was young. My mother died tragically when I was young. Picnic, lightning storm, and that's it. And
exactly
from that.
I in tribute to that very sentence you quote in Escape, I was talking about lots of people who came into the prison, and I said somebody had been arrested in an exceptional way, and in brackets I just put 2 words: bus stop, bomb explosion. And that was directly, a tribute to that way of being. I think the actual words are even better than that.
It was extremely well written, Escape, in comparison to the other titles which were available at the time.
Forget You Had a Daughter and all those other I forget the name of
Damage
Done. That one. That's the big seller in that.
Hell.
I
You
know.
forgot you had a daughter. I mean, there were lots. It was a
All
very
and
popular genre.
Warren Fellows really picked up any grisly story that he'd heard from anybody and put himself in the middle of it, which is fine. But the thing is, I just didn't enjoy it. Anyway, I thought I better put something of this in context, because it was only one event in uh, a lifetime's misfortunes and misadventures. So with Unforgiving Destiny, I kind of have linked all those up as best one can within without making it too big. It's bigger; it's like 400 pages or something like that, and I have recorded it on an audio, which is about time. Very time consuming doing audiobooks, but you've done some things like that yourself, haven't you?
I had narrators read mine. I didn't do it myself. I've tried, but I mean, you're a very good reader. You have a beautiful voice, and I could see it being quite easy for you. And it took you a long time. So for me, I would be.
But even so, it's not as easy as you'd think. You have to. I mean, I do my own editing on it so that I can take out. I'll just let a mistake go and then repeat it, and then again I have to tag the place where I've made the mistake and then go back and do it. It is quite a chore, but I plan on doing this now that people know a bit of the background. I think a narrated escape would be worth listening to, because it wouldn't be so. If I'm saying some of the things that seem a bit obscure in the book, and able to give the tone of it when people are being sarcastic or whatever, then it might save itself for that. If because I have no time, even I do installations for CCTV cameras of all things. Oddly enough, I'm trusted with the keys to about 60 London places. 200, I can switch on my phone and go straight into the living room of dozens of people around London. They all know what my past is. But you know what it is? I think they take some comfort in knowing that if I do a technical check on one of their cameras or something, and I tune in and I see dead body, knives hanging out of it in the living room, I'm saying, damn, that never goes in focus, that lens. I must change that one of these days, rather than thinking anything else about that corpse in the living room. The advantage of having sunk as low as one can possibly get is that the people have no particular fear that I'll take something the wrong way. There is no wrong way anymore. There just can't be.
They know what they're up against, that's for sure.
I suppose. I'll even help them out, cleaning products for the corpse,
So what's next for you, David? Will there be has there been any
well, I'd really like to get. I had my 66th birthday the other day, and I realized that nobody lives forever. I really have got to figure out a way of taking a great big folder of unfinished projects. And I'd like to do fiction. I've got a whole lot of outlines for a guy called Septon Cooper, who's a kind of Winston Wolfe, but a younger person and not so hammy as that, but comes in and fixes things or makes them worse, depending on how it goes. I always like Donald Westlake as a writer. He wrote under another name for most of the time. Oh, Richard Stark. He used to do the Parker series of crime sagas. And he also did some things that have a certain humor in them too. One thing was called The Hot Rock, became quite a funny film with Robert Redford. And I've been fooling around with a thing called White Russians about some Russian hijackers I met once. But, and some big thing that just never seems to be, I can't really get a hold of, which is almost kind of like science fiction, where somebody in 1988 sitting at home feeling lazy and says, "Oh, I wish I had the power that that remote control sitting on the tabletop would magically go into my hands." And it does. But this guy's no fool. He asked the good fairy. I mean, he's the kind of person, if he was granted 3 wishes, would say, all right, first wish, 1,000,000 wishes. Second wish, a reminder at wish 99999 that I only have 1 left. And last but most important wish, that I will never regret anything I wish for. Now, you got him cornered. The lawyers for the good fairy have come in and slam dunk the giver of this. But in the same way, this guy wants to know, who has given me this power, or am I mad? And what would it be like if you were immortal and could do anything? I mean, it's got lots of potential, hasn't it? You should read something called Replay. Guy lives and dies half a dozen times and tries to get his life right every time. A bit like you, he's sitting there with headphones. He's a disc jockey in California and has a heart attack every time he turns 40. Replay. It's I don't know why it's never been filmed. But that's where next for me. I'm going to try and get 10 years from somewhere that I don't know how to do. That would be good.
Well, best of luck with it. I mean, it helps to keep busy, and the more projects you have, you can just hop from one to the other, which I find is a good way to work, a good way to go forward.
Yeah, but don't you feel
nothing
you
ever
do
gets
justice
done.
to everything? I know. When we first got in contact, it must have been over a year ago or something now. I don't know when. I noticed there was the light touch of your hand over half a dozen things, but not necessarily all of them are coming to fruition.
Yeah, I'm originally from Orpington, which I think is where you...
Yes, you mentioned in your email that you knew the area. And in fact, it's got, just up from Petts Wood, there's a station called, it's got a double-barreled name, something Oaks. No, it's not Seven Oaks. What is the station?
You're thinking of Elmstead Woods, aren't you?
That's it, Elmstead. You knew it. Yeah, that's one. Isn't that the greatest little station around? It's deep set into the ground, and it's got gardens all around it. They've really done it up in the last few years.
Those days are all over. We've been digitalized, David.
Yeah, we have.
Assimilated. We have to think. Great.
It's good to talk to you, and if you want to, if this does all right for you, we might join up again and broaden the topics.